Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson, and it's my pleasure to have with us tonight, once again, one of Macon's famous intellectual figures, Dr. Buck Melton. Welcome, Buck.
Glad to be here.
That it's good to have you here. I know the life is busy for you these days with, we mentioned forthcoming Dragon Con appearance on another show, but putting that aside, we often make a query. Is there anything you'd particularly like to stimulate the audience with before we get into our discussion?
Well, we were talking in our previous episode regarding Dragon Con of how we are both getting increasingly less young.
Yes.
So I suppose I could mention that old aphorism, once a king, always a king, but once a knight is enough.
Ha 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 ha. Well, I'll let our audience figure that out.
Yes.
On that note. So we have a lot of things we discuss on many subjects, and one thing that's of paramount interest and importance, I think, is the forthcoming electoral cycle. And we've learned that a debate is happening, or allegedly would happen, between the two leading candidates, and I believe pretty soon, before the conventions, before they're formally been anointed as their party's candidate. And debates have gone on for a long time. Has that really been part of the Democratic cycle? I mean, it pops into my mind, Lincoln Douglas occasionally debates, but has that always been the case? And we have the we have the Kennedy, the Nixon debate, and that sort of set the stage. And I think a commission was put together to do this, and neither of the candidates are going to pay any attention to the commission now. But is that a good way to assess candidates?
I don't think it is, and you don't really hear about debate. I must admit that I've never really looked into it, but I have not heard a lot about presidential debates prior to Kennedy-Nixon, which were so famous precisely because they could reach so many people through the new medium of television, although there were a tremendous amount of radio listeners to that debate as well. The Lincoln-Douglas debates, of course, were not a presidential.
Yes.
They were for Douglas's Senate seat,
yes.
Which he was running as the incumbent. And I believe that he was not really interested in debating Lincoln, but Lincoln essentially chased him around the state of Illinois. Wherever Douglas was going, Lincoln would show up, and so Douglas sort of had to do the debating. But certainly modern debates at the presidential level, I don't think are very useful because I think they tend to be so carefully orchestrated. There is, it may be too strong a word, collusion between the two political parties, that they're not going to let they're not going to cooperate with the commission on debates if there's a chance of too many hard-hitting, embarrassing, off-script questions being asked that will catch the candidate unprepared and force him to think on his feet. So I think it's all a bunch of political theater of very limited usefulness.
Well, I think I scratched my brain a little bit to think of debates before the 1961. I'm not sure I can think of many. And one thing about the Lincoln-Douglas debates that might have been of interest is I think they had a series of 7 or 8 in
Yes.
different places, different congressional districts,
Yes.
possibly.
And long ones, too.
Right, and in those debates, a lot of the, I guess, intellectual journey that Lincoln undertook, he sort of did that. He's thinking about, well, how can I respond to that? What are my viewpoints on this or that? And in debates, maybe that's one of the things that happened. Many hours of going back and forth with people enjoying listening to it. The crowds, they were, oh boy, is that a good point? And is that a bad point? And the crowd, the large crowd, could tolerate several hours of listening to this interchange back and forth. And as the Civil War was just about upon us, I think a lot of these debating points turned out to be of great consequence to justify either secession or the defeat of slavery. I mean, and so it was useful. However, I think you correctly said, television plays such a big role in this, and I think remembering the Kennedy-Nixon debates, I think the problem was Nixon had not shaved that night, or else had a particularly, I don't know, but that was apparently what people noticed. Well, he had a real 5 o'clock shadow on, and
yes.
that resonated with, oh, look at that, whatever he said, I'm mostly looking at
There's more to it than that, actually, that I believe that Nixon had just had a bad cold or the flu or something, and so you could see him you had the 5 o'clock shadow, you could see him visibly perspiring. He had refused makeup, although he needed
I noticed
makeup.
we have on our show refused it also.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
we were
right.
perfectly coiffed.
Right. Yes.
And for the first of the debates, which were of course in black and white, the moderator, whose name I can't place right now, and Kennedy both wear dark suits against what was a gray background, and Nixon was wearing a gray suit that faded him into the background, so he didn't stand out. Now, for the second debate, he at least fixed that problem and wore a darker suit. But the fascinating thing about this, and I'm sure you've heard this, is that the radio audience who listened to the debate, and of course radio was still very huge in 1960. In many ways it is. But,
yes.
the people who heard the debates believed that Nixon had done a better job, whereas the people who saw the debates said that Kennedy had done a better job. And speaking of sociology, I think that is one of the most disturbing commentaries on the power of media and television and image. And that is one of the closest presidential elections we've ever had. So this election could easily have gone the other way if fewer people had tuned in on the television, or if television had not existed and more people had tuned in on the radio.
Well, I think one of the points there is Nixon was, as you mentioned, had a bad cold. But I think there was a debate with Herbert Walker Bush, and he had atrial fib, I think, or he just,
yes.
And so and that had an impact on him, and I think he looked at his watch or whatever, but newly diagnosed with that, and so the candidate's health really impacts on this. And another story I'm at least familiar with is with George W., that he didn't do well in the debate some years ago, and at least my inside information was that what was the problem? He was just tired, and he told all his handlers, I just want to take a break. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do my homework tonight. So I think,
and it showed.
It did.
Yes.
Yeah, it did. But is that really? What does that do? Is this mostly hype, makeup, and also the gotcha kind of stuff?
Yes.
So each person is trying to say, I knew Mr. whatever, I knew Mr. Kennedy, and you're not Mr. Kennedy, whatever that famous.
That was Lloyd Benson. And you're
like
no
that.
Jack Kennedy, and talking to Dan Quayle, I think.
Right.
Other than that one, and Reagan actually paraphrased that one later, but of course the two great zingers from any presidential debate, both of them were Reagan's. The first one was against Carter, and this was when Carter was president running for re-election, and Carter gave some long, involved answer, very heavy on statistics, and Reagan had planned this, and he just wanted to wait for the right moment.
Right.
And you know what the line was when they went to Reagan for the response. There you go again.
Right.
And that was the line that probably got him elected president, along with, are you better off than you were 4 years ago?
Well, I mean, what is going to happen in these debates? I would say intellectually they're not particularly useful. I guess it would confirm that a person can stand up for whatever period of time and take questions and respond in the English language and have some I guess, intellectual ability to do that. And I think for both presidential candidates, that's would be a good thing for the country to assess. Particularly, the story is with President Biden as to whether he's up to the job, and it could be maybe that would be one thing to talk about. And the question comes up, and maybe we spoke about that off camera a bit, why would Biden do that? And in general, I think the political wisdom that prevails here is you don't want to do this if you're well ahead of everyone. And I think that with Trump, he didn't debate anyone in the Republican Party. He didn't think it was necessary, could only lose, and his handlers said, no, don't do this. So is the idea that if Biden is agreeing to this, do his handlers believe that it's really going to be necessary for him to present himself appropriately? And the other question I would ask is, which is commonly what is said, is he going to be on some kind of medication to perk him up? We made comments about health, and you could go into one of these debates, and it's only, whatever it is, 45 minutes or an hour, maybe you didn't sleep well, or the other point is maybe something is preoccupying your mind, maybe your family is having issues. Maybe, I don't know if you're president, maybe something is happening, or different issues might put you at a disadvantage. Yes. Can you comment on that?
Well, I just in the larger sense that we have heard about these candidates. Probably we're talking about how important an election this is, how much is on the line, and it may really be true this time. But there have probably never been two presidential candidates in our history that the electorate knows more about at this point. What new are we going to learn?
Unfortunately,
yes.
Yeah. They know it's not.
Yes, I'm
not to the candidate's favor. No. They know about them.
Yes, but what new can we possibly learn in a 2-hour window that could sway us to vote either for or against? It just seems to me a completely useless exercise. We can count upon Trump to be boorish, to be grandstanding, to be insulting, and Biden is really very much, when he has debated in the past, an attack dog himself. So I'm almost to the point of rudeness in my memory, and so I think that this is just going to be. My guess is just a shameful episode of sniping and attacking with much more heat than light.
Well, it won't be an intellectual journey.
No,
so
it would
in other
not
words,
indeed.
the audience is not going to say, "I've got a great idea," says one of the candidates. I'm going to annex Canada, or whatever. I'm going to put the American flag on the North Pole. I don't know. So, is that a good idea? Or I'm going to lower tariffs, or whatever. I'm announcing tonight I've signed a peace treaty with Chinese, something like that. We just would not appear at this event. I wonder, just in general, what the candidates have to prove. So I think particularly for Biden, being able to just stand there for a couple of hours and take questions. And a lot might be the rules of the debate. And I think in the past, as I can recollect this, somebody gave one of the different, Hillary the questions, or there was some knavery. The people that were going to ask questions, here's what we're going to ask you. It's kind of like their exam. Here are your exam questions. I've snuck them to you.
Yes.
And so is that one reason that the commission, which is supposed to handle these things, both political parties thought that had not worked. The commission itself had been unable to put together a fair event, and now we're going to have something else.
Yes. Well, my thought is if there's any value in a debate at all, at least this sort of debate, It would be to see if a candidate can think on his feet. And so you need to hit him with a question that he's not anticipating and doesn't have any advanced knowledge of. I would probably liken it to question time in the House of Commons, the witty repartee.
Which is quite good, isn't it? I
yes.
mean, you can't expect that from an American politician, I don't
and
believe.
we should. I mean, that's the problem.
They're
we
not
should.
quick,
But
their wits are not that quick.
Yes. But I think it's just, I really get the feeling that this is going to be, the clean version here, a peeing contest between two testosterone-driven lions in winter. And we know what they're going to say. They're not going to say anything new. I think that character and age and infirmities are going to be the targets. And so they're going to be sniping at each other personally. And I just think that no good can really come of this. It's just going to be another episode in what's probably going to go down in history as one of the worst presidential elections ever.
Well, I mean, one thing to say is we're anticipating President Trump to just be full of vitriol and subdued curses in his
That's
voice
his style.
there.
Yes.
Well, he might help himself if he were restrained and genteel. It would be such a change. That would be he might be helped and not being provoked. I can't imagine that would be the case. And actually, I think it does him no good to be trying to interrupt or just trying to seize the microphone from his opponent or whatever. I wouldn't think that did him any good, particularly because it seems like there are two issues here that the parties are competing for. Number one is to getting their constituency out, come out and vote. And secondly, which is I think an important issue, that small percentage of undecided voters in undecided states. So if you're an undecided voter in California, well, shrug your shoulders, that doesn't matter much. But in Georgia, it does. And how is that going to play itself out in these debates? I guess that's a pretty good question.
Well, I think that if the fate of the country, if you will, and
shall we say the world?
Yes,
shall we say the world?
Yes, and the fate of this election are in the balance. If you've got any political sense and indeed any intelligence at all, you're going to want to identify that demographic within that undecided group and find out what appeals to them. And my guess, and I'm not a political operative, but my guess would be whichever one you are, Biden or Trump, more of the same is not going to appeal. You're going to have to, during this debate, be somebody different that will appeal to that undecided demographic in the states like Georgia or Ohio or what have you. And so if it's just them getting up and doing the same old, I don't really see the point in it. But my guess is these are two men of very strong personalities. They have a supreme confidence in themselves, or they wouldn't have gotten there.
Often misplaced.
Yeah, often. I mean, I didn't say right or wrong, but they're the sort you can't tell anything, and so they're probably going to squander this opportunity. I'd say the one who does the better job of reinventing himself for that 2 hours, to the degree that these presidential debates sway the public at all, that's what will win.
You know, apparently it's still a little undecided, but there might be a number of debates, and there are different ways that I think one was an audience going to be there, not an audience, questions that are going to be asked. And I would particularly wonder for President Biden, is he going to have the prompter there, the TV prompter? I don't know. I mean, is that normal? And apparently, maybe for both candidates, that people are pretty good at reading. So I can read, this is my statement, I can read this. And in a way, another thing to consider is maybe they should have their advisors debate, if I can say that. No,
Now, there's a thought.
Not totally.
I'm
Whoever's telling Biden what to do or whatever, and
I do it with panels. Have two panels, and I was actually part of such a panel. Not that I was a presidential advisor, but during the 1984 election, I was an undergraduate here at Mercer.
Yes.
Almost a graduate at that point.
Right.
A friend of mine put together a panel. There's a Republican panel and a Democratic panel, and there was a debate among the panels. And so, yeah, take the top advisors.
Maybe that would be more useful in a way. I mean, because I think if you're a political figure, well, you're raising money. What do? You wake up, brush your teeth, and you sit down and a cup of coffee, and then your secretary, you call Bob. Hi, Bob. How are you? I'd like a little money. Great. It's great to see you. Okay. Now, who do I call next? They do that, and then there may be. Here's what's happened in the Middle East. They might say that, and we think you should do that. And if you're really good, you might say, well, give me one other opinion, and I'll choose between the two, or something like that. But in general, they don't get into the weeds about these great national events, and they depend on their advisors, which, just speaking in a neutral fashion, well, Biden, we can sort of see what Biden does with his advisors. You can see which way they lead him. It's less certain with Trump as to he might not take his advice as much as to what policies he would institute. So that's a little bit problematical as to how that goes on.
Well, delegation is always it's always a very difficult thing to do, especially if you've got a strong personality and once again have that confidence, misplaced or otherwise, in yourself. If you're certain you can do it better than the other guy, but you've got a really big job and you can't do it all yourself and you're going to have to delegate. I have worked under micromanagers before, and I've found it a terrible thing to do. One of the best, I know very little about the science of management, but the one best piece of advice that I've ever gotten from somebody at Middle Georgia State, and somebody whom I respect immensely, says you hire the best people you can and then get the heck out of their way. But you have to know when to listen to them and when to know that they know more than you do. But you do have to take responsibility if they get it wrong. Harry Truman's very famous phrase, "The buck stops here,"
yes.
that he had on his desk.
Yes.
But, I'm not sure if that's what we really get a lot of the time.
Now, one of the interesting things is that the assumption is that this debate is possible on point number one. These aged septuagenarians are both going to be healthy enough to do it. No one's going to have a cold. No one's going to have back pain or whatever. And their health issues are out there. President Biden has atrial fib and takes blood thinner for that. And he's had issues. I guess I could say this. He's had, it's public information, and I hesitate to comment on anyone's mental issues without examining the patient. But it's been revealed that when his aneurysm, he had two aneurysms, but when the sinister one that had ruptured again at the time of surgery. I mean, I was surprised to find that out, that appeared within the past week or so, that story. So obviously, I won't say more about it, but that's been quite a nip. And having the atrial fib is also quite a nip. And the story with President Biden, actually, his life expectancy might be, I've seen this, shorter than, or at least not as long as you would think, because of he's a bit overweight. Is this issue? Is that issue? So neither are in perfect health, and so something could prevent that the interchange from occurring.
Of course, this raises the question of one of the gross out stories of the past week, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s brain issues.
Yes.
So part of his brain is now gone, apparently. So I don't know if over time he can rewire to regain those missing functions. But
well, they only ate the less useful part.
One hopes. So.
It's not. I mean, as I take it here, I think it's not anything particularly devastating. I mean, it's not good to have these little creatures eating your brain. But it's
reason number 1080 to be a vegan.
Cysticercosis, I think is the name of it. And the little devils get in there and they get calcified, and they're sort of can only eat a little bit. It's really a pretty common third world problem, and people do well with it. I'm assuming that he's doing okay, which is another point here. The country is kind of crying out for some other choice, and no one is much up here except Mr. Kennedy, and both parties are doing everything possible to keep him away from the major, election possibilities. And I think it's been thought that the Democrats would be more at risk, but apparently not necessarily, and that Trump could, in these fragile states, were a substantial third-party candidate appear, it could really impact the election, as Ross Perot did.
Yes.
Quite a surprise. I mean, and each of the political activists are trying to do something like that. We'll push Kennedy, and that may be an issue that is out there.
Yes, the two parties have rarely in our history held so much hatred for each other as now. It has happened, but rarely. But the one thing that they agree on is that they would join forces to quash any serious third-party development, as I think you saw with the Tea Party in its infancy about 15, 16 years ago. So. And I think that's sad, because I think that we've got the stalemate, we've got this vilification. Maybe a viable third party would be the best thing that could happen in American politics right now. But of course, I'm sure the Biden and Trump would lock any third party candidate out of those debates.
Maybe there's something good in a way in that these parties are broad, big tents, because we have such a diverse country, and I'm going to be with these guys. And so there's a big, I wouldn't normally be on their team, but we're all the same. We've come together. Maybe that's good. Maybe
yes.
That's good.
Except that the extremes seem to be in charge in both parties right now. It's not a moderate left party and a moderate right party. The extremes, the loud extremes, are working to drag the parties as far to the polar opposite as possible, and then reasonable people, what Nixon called the silent majority, somewhere in the middle. Where are we supposed to go? And that's a matter of great concern.
Well, another issue is just we've spoken about this, the national debt, the impending economic problems, inflation, and certainly it's worrisome to me. We've seen violence in the streets. We've seen lots of hatred flowering, and if economic issues go down, it would be attractive for people to rage. So if your life is unhappy and you have lots of difficulties for whatever, putting bread on the table, for instance, it really does stir up all kinds of unpleasant events. I would say that.
Well, unfortunately, if we do not get a handle on some things, I think Thomas Malthus is going to solve the problem in a very effective way, but a very unpleasant way.
Well, that's another conversation.
Indeed.
Apparently, the ladies have decided to slow up on reproduction, so maybe that problem will solve itself a little.
Well, in this country, yes. In other countries, not so
well,
much.
I mean, it's hypothetical. I mean, at least some people have alleged the world's population will peak at 10 billion. That's still a tremendous amount of stress.
Yes.
Well, on that note, as we sail off in the sunset, once again, thank you for your erudite wisdom, which we've come to expect from you. So thank you a lot.
Indeed.
Thank you.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.